We are going to go straight into it too, because I think for you and me both, we've seen a little bit of the mindset struggles in particular with business and traveling so much for both of us, how that's impacted business, where you focus, etc. But first big question is, what are you focusing on now?
Yeah, so I'm so excited. I've been leading, like, kind of planting seeds about this for a while, but I'm diving into teaching people about solo travel. And I call solo travel like SOULO. So it's taking people on a deeper level. So even if it's somebody who maybe they're not like solo traveling and they're traveling with their family or something, they can still like create this experience that takes them on a deeper level. I have a course that's coming out, so I've been really diving my energy into that lately.
Ooh, we have to ask you all about that because I find one of the biggest challenges is when you're in this transformation field, whatever it is you're doing, nutrition, travel, healing, it's such a undertaking to take all this knowledge and this one-to-one work and your personal experience and put it into a course, into a group coaching. How has it been that process where you choose, what do I put in? What do I leave out? How do I make sure it's ready?
Stood on the mountain and looked at, like, what are the questions people have been asking me? And so I get a lot of questions about logistics. I get questions about, like, the top 3 questions I get with because I've been solo traveling for the last 6 years. I've been a nomad this whole time, suitcase life, and the top 3 questions I always get are, "How do you afford it? Aren't you lonely? Safety's big one." And so I started with those questions and then kinda looked at, like, okay, let's start with logistics and planning and hone in, like, on the basics. Let's look at the basics and then dive into, like, packing and how your, like, energy around that. And I'm bringing in an expert, Catherine Leamy, who she's the author of a book called Dare to Travel Solo, and she's the 5 kilo traveler on Instagram, but she's like she travels that way. So I'm bringing her in, and then we're gonna look at going deeper, like listening to your body and accessing your intuition, calling in your travel guides. So people who are maybe a little more spiritual, but even people who are like, I don't know about this, but I'm curious. We're gonna yeah, go a little deeper towards the end.
This is so good because it touches on 2 things. One is the idea that you can always bring in other people in your network or even people that you kinda just vaguely know to add to the knowledge you already have. You would be surprised how many people say yes. Even if you haven't really talked to them that much, it's an amazing opportunity. And then 2, this idea that you've taken what they're asking for, but you're actually going a lot deeper to what do they really need. So they might be asking
Yeah.
for, is it safe? And you are going deeper into, okay, how do you create this intuition around it? How do you read the signs? How do you build the confidence? That's not something that they might have the words to say. How do you find, and I always struggle with this myself, how do you find the balance between the information and then the support there? How, if you're not going to give live support, how do you manage it? I feel like this is always the conundrum.
I personally always like to start courses live because I'm not only am I teaching, but I'm learning at the same time. So I'm learning from my students. I get to witness their body language. I get to see how when I'm talking about a topic that maybe it's a little like, oh, I don't know about that for people. And I like to balance it between like, hey, here's some information. So maybe here's a short presentation and really like hands on. We're going to really dive in. So you're not just like digesting information, you're actually like implementing it in the quote, like real world.
You brought in some interesting points here because it's almost as if I hadn't even thought about the body language part because it's not just the feedback they give you, but it's also what can you visually see? Where do they look completely confused, but they don't say anything? Or where does it rub a nerve and maybe it requires a little bit extra language around that? What made you decide on doing a course? Because we should probably walk through your journey. So when you first started as an entrepreneur, the first version of that was what?
Yeah, the first version was really I was traveling, so I quit corporate life in 2018 and I was one of those that like sold everything and grabbed my suitcase and set off on a one-way ticket. And I was traveling for about a year and savings were dwindling and I thought, "Okay, I gotta start making money again so I can sustain this lifestyle," because I knew it was clear within the first few weeks that I was living my dream and like, "Yes, I wanna continue doing this." And so I started picking up, like, freelance work and everything, and then I was always interested. I've been on a lot of retreats, and so I was always interested in retreats, and I've had many other coaches, like, say to me, like, "Hey, you'd make a really great coach," and I still didn't really know much about that, and I'm one of those people who I kind of, like, will dive in blindly to something. If people who know Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 7, so the enthusiast, and so I'm like rose-colored glasses. I'm like, "Yes, let's go. Okay, we'll figure it out along the way. Throw me to the wolves. We'll figure it out." And so I kind of took that approach and stepped into like a coaching certification and then I started offering travel design services. So I was like designing travel planning and designing trips for people. And then the pandemic hit and nobody was traveling. So at that point I had to pivot and I was like, what am I going to do? Because I've got to make, yeah, still going to live, make money. And I was back here in Dallas living with my sister during the pandemic, and so I shifted to oracle cards because that was something in my travels. I always had my cards with me, and random travelers, people I would meet would ask me like, "Hey, pull a card for me," and so I would pull, and it was always spot on, and I was like, "Okay, there's something here," and so I started going deeper, and then I started doing these live with some Wednesdays and doing oracle card pulls, and then I taught a course on oracle cards. And then when people started traveling a little more, it started, like, peaking up again. Like, I always had an idea for leading the solo experiences and taking people on, like, retreats, and I held my first one in Brazil last year. And so it just kind of all in a roundabout way, it's like it started coming to this point where I thought, okay, one of the things, and I know we may touch on this, and I know this is what I appreciate about you as well, is I'm in the Rio plan and I follow I do your I've been doing your fitness for like 6 months and I love it. And I love that it's accessible and people want the one-on-one support, they can upgrade to that. But one of the things in the coaching world that I look at is it's not really accessible to a lot of people. And it kind of becomes this elitist service in a way where it's like, hey, if you've got the money to invest tens of thousands of dollars into this thing, then let's do it. But there's a whole group of people who they can't access that right now. And so I started thinking about that with my travel coaching and retreats. And I thought, you know what? I would love to teach something that is at a lower price point that's still giving people a lot of value. So if that's all that they were to do, or even if they're just following my content on Instagram and not even, or my blog or something, and not even engaging in a paid service, they're still getting value. But I really, that's something that I've like really had to dissect in my own journey over the years is looking at the industry as a whole and like, hey, how can we really like serve more people? Because that's really the goal at the end of the day. It's not like, let's serve the people who have access. It's like, no, let's serve as many people as we can.
There's a lot of people listening who either have started a business or are thinking about it, and they are especially in that space of service for healing, for empowerment, for whatever it could be, but it's always something to help the world. And it's very challenging because the messaging in the coaching world is so much of, well, whoever pays for it gets it, and it has to be this amount. And it's difficult to reconcile that when you're someone who wants to be the healer or you wanna be the coach or you wanna have a difference. And I think it's a good what you're saying is that there's a few different ways people can access that information from you. They can go on Instagram, they can read your blog, they you can listen to you being a guest on shows like this, and that can help people who might not be able to pay. And I think that's a really important part for people's, like, business souls. You should have some way to share that is not just gated to the people that have that money to pay. Because I also think I don't know, I'm curious to get your opinion on this. I also feel, at least in the business coaching world, that even if people can pay to work with you, they necessarily shouldn't if they have to have certain prerequisites first. Like, it's not just, "Oh, everyone should go and start, and because they pay, they'll have the results." There needs to be some foundation, I believe personally, before someone goes and spends 10 to 30K.
Yes. I'm one of the I've been on my own journey with
Yeah,
that. It's like I invested in a program when I did not have the
yeah,
income. And I thought it was like I was like, "Oh, well, the coach, the coach earned their investment back right away, and different people, like other people I know have done that. So surely I'll do that too." And I had no idea all of the mindset and deep work I was going to have to do, because that's one thing when you are and it's not to say that people who have steady, secure jobs don't deal with confidence and imposter syndrome and all of that. And it's something very different when you strip that away, because I was very confident in my job and I made a good salary and I had a great team and all of that. And then when I took all of that away and I was on my own, it was almost as if I left. I remember leaving corporate and sitting in Thailand and thinking like, what skills do I even have? Like, really just like it was almost like I was starting from ground zero, and even though I had, like, a college degree and had worked in corporate for over 10 years and, like, had all of this, like, proof, my mind didn't believe it, and so I had to go through a lot of hoops and everything, and so in human design, for those familiar, it's like I have a 6-2 profile line. I'm the role model hermit, so I'm meant to like, lead by example. So that means that in some ways, it's like I'm gonna have to fail more so that I can teach others and say like, "Hey, let's look at this." But I do think that it's when you're starting out, like if I were to look back, I'm like, "Do I regret doing anything that I did?" No. The timing of it, yes. Maybe like I would have it's more the timing and looking at like yeah, income, I should have had something there that would have had a cushion to make me feel a little more like maybe there is a little discomfort involved, but I kind of just like the way I went about it, but I look back and I think like if I were to go back, I likely would have if I were to invest, would have hired a one-on-one like business coach or something to like really like say like, "Hey, let's just get clear on what it is and start making money." Like, let's start making money first and then let's like go deeper into all of that.
yeah. Let's get the fundamentals of business here first and then go from there because, yeah, each case is unique. Totally agree with that. And there are some people, for example, let's say you have a huge engaged Instagram community, but you're not monetizing. I feel that's the case of someone, okay, you've got the resource of the people and you can translate that into a business. But that's very different from someone who doesn't have the money. They haven't even started the business idea. They don't have a community. They like that's a totally different person who would benefit more from the one-to-one versus anything else. But I feel like you've gone on such a journey with this and you've brought a lot into I'm sure how you're creating your own offers. Is there something when you're now making, for example, the course that you are being sure to build in that you feels either been missing in what you've done before or that maybe it was there, but not to the degree that you would have liked?
So it's interesting that we are talking about investment, because one of the things now is I am charging a little more for this course this time around, because it's like when I launched and this is what I say to one of my coaches and friends says, you got to take your body with you. And I've talked about this before with energetic pricing. Like it's got to feel in your body good. So it's one thing to say like the idea of like, yeah, I want to make 10K a month. But if you're making 1,000 or 0, going from 0 to 10 is like it's like, yes, you can get there, and it's like, is your body ready to go there? And it's gonna require a lot to get there. And so when I launched my Oracle course, I charged $44 for it. It was a 5-week course live, me leading it, but that was what I was comfortable with at the time, because I was new to charging for my services and new to not even charging for my services, but I was new to like stepping out as like a spiritual like oracle, and like cuz I had like a very like different conservative religious background, and so it was like it was this new thing for me stepping out, and so it was a lot at once. And so I was like, okay, $44 feels good. And then the next time I ran it, I think I bumped it up to like 77 or 97, and then like eventually it got up to like 200 or something like that. But so I am this time like I'm in a different place energetically with that, and I know the value of everything that I'm teaching and what people will walk away with. So I am charging a little more this time in that regard. Um, so I think that's something that is different that I kind of surprised myself with too, because I was like, oh yeah, okay, this actually feels really good.
Yeah, there's so much around that too, isn't there? This idea I love the idea of energetically, you want the price to align with where you are right now. Because it's almost like so many coaches forget that they'll tell you to start with a really high ticket level, but then they forget that they didn't start out that way either. So expecting someone brand new to jump to that feeling of that price being aligned is very challenging. There's a lot of inner work that goes on. And I'm just as much as you a believer in making it an investment. It is your time, it is your expertise. I believe those should be valued. And that's very different though of you feeling comfortable with the price, whatever it is, versus you saying, "Oh, I'm putting this price because I should."
It is, and it's allowing me to, with that, actually go deeper with the topics and what it is that I'm wanting to cover and bring in experts. It's like that's something I've always wanted to do. Like I want to bring in experts and I also want to compensate them as well because it's their time. And so that's one of the things I recognized in the past. It's like charging, it's like, yes, charging lower prices, but at the same time, it's like to really deliver it the way that I want to, I need to be able to take care of like all of the things. And so all of the different areas.
The money and the mindset piece of entrepreneurship, they are big mazes. Like, there's so much around it that we could talk about and so many nuances. Because already people listening have heard us talk about how we wanna make things accessible. We want to also value your time, and then those things can seem contradictory, right? Like, how do you make it accessible, but also make sure it reflects the time and quality that goes into it and the investment? Because I've offered things to people for free, the same things that are now significantly more, and definitely the people who had to pay put in a lot more effort and accountability than those who got it for free. So there is that piece too, but I feel like it's so nuanced, isn't it? Like there's so many different levels of this and figuring out where you align. So if anyone's listening feeling confused about where to start, I think your piece about energetically where are you at and how can you feel comfortable if you want to charge more? What will make you feel comfortable with that?
It's like something sounds really great and we're responding in the moment, or we have business friends or people who are doing it and we're like, yes, or I love the person who's leading it. I want to support them. But then it's like life, you let life and distractions and everything get in the way. So I really feel it's like where you are at as well. And like that readiness level, the majority of people, though, there has to be some kind of stake in the game. And a lot of times money is that factor. When you do have to put something forward, it is causing them to show up in a different way.
Yeah, this is a good distinction because money is not always the motivator for anyone listening that's trying to figure out their pricing or what they want to do. I saw this with wellness. When I was a trainer primarily, I would have people when I was doing private in-home training that were paying upwards of 200 an hour sometimes for a session. And they would often cancel sessions, which were not refundable because it's last minute cancellations. They would show up a lot of times hungover. They would do all these things and they were not invested even though the money was there. And I've also done free classes where people are there every single time. So it's kind of a situation of what is that person's motivator and where they are at the time I think is good too. Those people who were not showing up for me, they were not at the point where they really valued their wellness yet, and that's why they weren't invested even though financially they were.
Leaders, I could also see like in my own journey, it's like maybe I was attracting those people, but there was something that I was reflecting back or in my own journey that maybe I wasn't fully there. And now it's like I've moved through a lot. And so I am showing up more and committed to what it is that I'm I'm really like saying yes to, because when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So it's like, okay, if you're going to say yes to something, then why not like really, really give it what you have, the energy that you have.
You've come to this realization about your work and about how you're approaching it.
I was intending to launch this course back in April, and it just didn't feel right. It's like I kept talking about it, and but then I didn't realize I there was a lot of stuff I was working through personally, and didn't realize that it was weighing on me and like kind of standing in the way as a block. And so once I've started like diving into that and just kind of like shifting, it's kind of like you clean, like when you think of cleaning a space that's cluttered, and it's like they say, you let go of something and it makes room for something else, and it's so true. And even when you're in it and you teach people this, it's like you forget that sometimes. Because before I was in this energy of like, I need money, and I would look at everything else except my business. It's like I wasn't seeing my business as like a solution.
It seems like such a simple thing that you said of one, the being I'm okay doing the admin mundane stuff sitting at the computer, which is a big realization if you're someone who left a tight corporate world to explore and have freedom. It is a big shift to be able to say, "Okay, I'm gonna come back to the computer and also do admin stuff that I don't like," because it brings back that trauma of when you were in that other world, right? It feels like you're going backwards a little bit, and you subconsciously rebel against that. The same thing with why we struggle so much with having a schedule, accountability with milestones, making a strategic plan, like, all of that stuff, I think especially for those of us who were formerly in the work world, coming into this, it's a lot of stuff to go over. Like, it's a lot to work through.
Yeah, and the rebelling, I definitely did, because I was always a very like structured, organized, like on top of everything, finances. And it was kind of like, oh, I left, I'm free. And it took a while for me to like come back down to earth, really. Like come back down to like, oh wait, yeah, I do actually need a little bit of structure, and I do need some accountability. And
Yeah.
it's such a journey.
Looking back, and you probably would say this too, looking back, if I had known this when I first left corporate, which was 11 years ago, if I had known this, I would have given myself, if it was financially feasible at the time, which it just about was, maybe 6 months to a year to just rebel, to not try to force anything new. Instead, it was I jumped right back into, "Okay, we're gonna make this work. We're gonna grow. We're gonna ascend. You're going to grow your business like you would have gotten your promotion, and we're gonna judge how well you do based on how much you sell." And then I got stuck in that cycle for years.
It was interesting because I did allow myself the time. I gave myself 8 months. But as soon as I got to Thailand, I met a coach, and she was like, "Hey, I'm looking for someone." And I like I just dove in and was like, "Okay, great." And then I would find myself just sitting at my computer again for like 8 hours. I'm like, "What am I doing?" Just give yourself a break, and then commit to and say like, "Hey, on this date, I'm going to come back and I'm going to start."
It's like the relationship, isn't it? It's like you should probably do a little bit of healing before you jump into a serious relationship, which is what your business
Yes.
is.
Yes. Yes, and I don't think I didn't personally, like, I didn't know anything about, like, being an entrepreneur or looking at your business like that, and it so is, it really is a relationship, like, you have to nurture it, you have to sit with it, you have to do the hard things.
Yeah. And if you haven't done the inner work before you start, which let's be real, most of us won't, then it's a case of being committed to doing it while you're in your business and not waiting for burnout or breakdown or for when you walk away from something you've been doing for years that's working because you're tired of it or you're bored or all these things that happen because we haven't also been working on the inner part.
I say a lot of people, when they're going on a trip, they're so focused on everything that they wanna do, and you could say that you could equate the same thing with fitness. It's like when you have a client show up, they're so focused on the number, they're not thinking about how they wanna feel. They're thinking about the end result.
If I look back, and both you and I have done tons of traveling, if you look back and you think about the most memorable experiences, the stuff that sticks with you, that changed you, that introduced you to incredible people, often was not on the itinerary. It was kind of part of something that you a decision you made, and then this happened.
Yeah, it's always those when the plans fall through or there's a detour or something, that's where you find the hidden gem.
Yeah. I was talking about this earlier with another guest about how when we start business, it's often for freedom, for impact, for to be more time, to be there with family. It's so rarely because you want to reach seven figures. It's so rarely that you start for that, but it warps into that, and in the pursuit of that, you actually hold yourself back because you don't think about how do you wanna feel. You think about this number, and I love that you brought the fitness, it's close to my heart, but you think about this number and you don't think about, like, why do I want that number, or what kind of business model do I wanna create that supports the way I wanna feel? And those are important questions because you don't wanna reach the point where you're at the top of that mountain, there's another gigantic one, and you have no energy to keep going.
Yes, if that is your goal, but why? Like what is the reason for that? And I from day 1, my values were freedom and flexibility. I said that was why I was taking this lifestyle.
I mean, now with this podcast and, like, just the life that nomading, I have been around people who are doing multi seven-figure, eight-figure businesses, and most of them started and grew because they found something they really enjoyed doing, and they found a way to offer it. And yes, of course, there's the investing in the marketing and etcetera. I'm not gonna pretend that didn't play a part, but they were not driven by this, "I must make this amount of money," and they ended up making it anyway. You gotta start on that path of, "Why am I doing this?" And then from there, you can get to where you wanna be. And ultimately, like you said, if your biggest values are met, then that is success. For anyone listening, whether they catch the beta or they get the final version, where can they find out more? And also, where can they connect with you? Because you offer so many interesting things about travel. It's not just about logistics for people listening, there's a lot of inspirational musings and perspective shifts to think about too that you share. But bottom line is, you go to Robin's profile and you will feel enlightened.
Yes, so you can go website, Instagram, Facebook, it's all Wandering Ant, AUNT.
Thank you so much for coming on this show, for sharing. I'm really excited to see how this course evolves and to see how the people that you work with just have these amazing experiences.